and welcome to the Hybrid School Builders Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Foley, and I am so glad you are joining me today. I am a fellow grassroots founder who is hoping to make your journey toward founding a sustainable hybrid school a little bit easier. If you are dreaming of starting a hybrid school, or perhaps you've already gotten started, you are in the right place. Join me as we dive into real stories, practical tips, and hard-won lessons that I have learned to help you launch and grow your program with confidence. Remember, building a hybrid school is not just about creating a business or creating jobs. It's not even about just serving the children who attend the program. It's literally about reshaping the landscape of education, and we can do that one community, one entrepreneur, and one program at a time. Hi. So today I wanted to talk about validating your market. So if you're just in the beginning stages, you want to make sure that your market can handle what it is you are building, all right? That they want it and they're willing to pay for it, and that your vision matches up with what your community wants, okay? So this is really not a super complex process. It would involve a few things. I take you through this on my strategic planning course, which is like a 6-week course that I have on my website. It's not that expensive. There's also just a free market validation guide. I walk you through this in more detail, but I'm just going to outline it here. That course also includes some of what was in the previous episodes about your why and your strengths and your weaknesses to help you understand what you and why you are personally building this, okay? But the market validation process is really just like taking the time to observe what is around you. So you're looking at other schools in your areas, you're looking at how much they cost, you're looking at how far away they are, you're looking at the type of educational options that there are. Are there other hybrid schools? Are there micro schools? Are there charter schools? Are there Montessori schools? Are there Waldorf schools? Okay, you're asking these types of questions and just looking around. And you can do this with Google, and just like see. You are also looking at you're just taking a minute to look at your demographics. You can probably answer this question off the top of your head as far as like what type of area you live in. But you're just taking a few minutes to observe that and then look at what that means for you. So like I talked about in the other episode, if you're in a very rural, low population area, there's just not a lot of people, okay? If you're in a poorer area, as far as like the average household income isn't really high, that tells you something too. Maybe both of those things, maybe one of those things. If you're in a very high population area, maybe you're in a city, maybe you're in a suburb, maybe you're in an area where there's just, the economy is booming, people are highly educated, people make a lot of money. There's private schools around, they're doing well. Okay, those are like kind of the two ends of the spectrum, right? You just want to like observe that because that's going to influence what succeeds in those areas. Now, I think in most areas with people, with a certain number of people, there probably is going to be a need for an alternative model of school. You just need to make sure that there's enough people that want what you want to offer and are able to pay for it. Okay, so those are like the three things. There's got to be enough people who want what you are trying to build and that they are able and willing to pay for it, okay? Now, I did not do this process when we started. It wasn't an official process. However, there was a couple years, I guess, if you talk about just being in the momming world, where the people that I did know seemed to have the same problem. Okay, so there wasn't, and you may be in this exact same situation where you're like, well, the reason I'm looking into this is because I have this need and I have 2 or 3 or 4 friends who have the same need and we just don't like any of our options. Like there isn't anything out there that we like. That's how we started. That's how I started. So it doesn't have to be this big formal thing, but I would encourage you to go through a more strategically systematic process, which it doesn't just help you assess where your market is at and what their need is. It also just brings awareness to the program so that people just start thinking about it and talking about it. So you're looking at your demographics, as I said. You're looking at your competition, right? What other programs are out there and like what kind of people as far as like their income level and all of that are around. Now, a hybrid school specifically, in my experience, is not a model that appeals to a whole lot of two full-time working parents, okay? For obvious reasons, because you have to be able to homeschool. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but that hasn't been the primary market that I have seen it appeal to. I think that more full-time micro schools or private schools, just full-time schools in general, are what appeal to full-time working parents. They often even need before and after care, okay? So if that's the group of people that and that you think are actually interested in this, you might have to think about doing more of a micro school or more of a full-time model. But that's kind of another thing that you would have to get into, and we could talk a little bit more about that when we talk about private school versus homeschool supplement as far as a business model. But you just want to know like who your market is. In my experience, hybrid school parents are often they're homeschool parents in the sense that they have one parent who's home or has a flexible schedule at least half of the time, okay? And there are certainly parents who are, a lot of our parents that are hybrid school have a full-time working parent and then a part-time working parent, okay, including me, right? And that's actually probably ideal because they have learned to live on one income, but then they get a little bit of a part-time income, which helps the family and also will often help pay for the hybrid school, as well as give them the time because their kids are at school to work part-time, okay? So it can be a nice balance for parents like that, I think, especially a mom who maybe was home for a few years with kids or only worked a little bit part-time. Kids go to school 2 or 3 days a week, and now they can work sometimes at the school or some other job, especially if it's flexible part-time, okay? So I've known parents who are counselors, that are therapists, parents who cleaned houses. We've got moms all along the spectrum who use the time their kids are in school to work part-time, okay, which helps pay for the school. Okay, so that's you're probably going to be your demographic in a hybrid school, okay? So you're going to observe those things. And then what you want to do is tap into that group of people and just start listening to them and talking to them and bringing awareness. And again, this can be pretty informal. You probably already know some of them. Like I said, that's how I started. It's just conversations at the park, conversations at our MOPS table at church, and realizing that there was this gap. Like people just didn't really know. They didn't like their options. Like we had 3 options: homeschool, private school, public school, and we didn't like something about all of them. So that you might just start there, okay? But it's very helpful if you can say, hey, I'm just going to have an interest meeting. I have this idea and I've heard about these programs that run part-time. They're like part-time private schools. They're a lot more affordable than private schools, full-time private schools, but they deliver a lot of the same benefits. And I think it's really interesting. And I'm looking at possibly starting one sometime. And who's interested? If you know anybody who's interested, send them my way. And then put a date on the calendar, and it might be a meeting at the park, it might be at your house, it might be at the library. And you can just start with just a interest meeting, okay? Now, as the founder, the leader, potential founder, you want to have something to deliver to them that isn't just complete, you don't want to have just like a complete brainstorm session, although there is a place for that, and it can be fun. But you might just, you want to go in with some degree of here's what this can look like, okay? And I have a sample page on my website where you can just go print it out right now if you want to. That's like a sample, like a year, like a 34-week year that meets 2 days a week and delivers these subjects, costs roughly this much. And I can give you a pretty close budget for what it can look like, but there's a big chunk that depends on your facility cost. So you're gonna have to figure that out. But it can give you a model so that they can look at that and they can say, oh, okay, it's going to look like this is what a day would look like. There's even a schedule on there, a rough schedule. And this is it's something that I've seen work before, close to something I've seen work before. So it's very doable, but you may modify that. But it gives people something concrete to look at and say, okay, so you're saying I'm dropping my kids off at 9 o'clock on, Tuesdays or Mondays and Tuesdays, and I'm picking them up at 3:30, and they're going to cover this, and this, and they're going to have recess, and they're going to have lunch, and they're going to have all of this for 34 weeks a year. What do I do at home? And then, okay, well, here's what you do at home. Do I have to do it? Well, maybe not, right? So like you want to have an idea for some of those things, but you don't have to have like all the answers. You can just be like, well, one way to do it is to assign all the work from home. Another way to do it is to not assign all the work from home and just have the days at school very self-contained for the most part, and then only have one or two of the things, because I do highly recommend having math and reading pretty closely aligned. It's just a lot easier for the kids to learn when it's pretty like cohesive between home and school for those particular subjects. That's a side note to you as the founder. But you can tell your parents like, well, there's a couple different ways that I've heard of doing this, and I kind of think this might be a good idea, but what do you guys think? Like get their input on it, okay? And it helps if you can point to other programs that exist, like Providence Hybrid Academy, or there's other ones, and they can see that like this is a thing. When we first started, a lot of people hadn't even ever heard of this model. There's still a lot of people who haven't heard of it, but we had 2 years where we had to explain to people like, no, this is not a co-op, because people coming from the homeschool world thought it was a co-op. And a co-op is a cooperative model where the parents stay and they have to teach something, and it's more affordable, but it's also a whole lot more time and commitment. And I had to keep explaining to people that that's not what it was. And I was still explaining to like insurance companies what it was, because they were like, well, are you a school? We can't do this for schools. I'm like, well, we're not legally a school. We kind of look like school, but we're not really a school. It was a couple of years where people didn't really understand what the model was. So you may have some people come in who are like, have a preconceived notion about what it is. So it's very helpful to have something really concrete. So what I would suggest is just start with one person, start with 2 people, start with whatever little group you have. Maybe you have a Facebook group, or some social media group that's like parents in the area, or a church group, or a mom's group, or just, your kid's little league team or whatever. And you just start a conversation and tell them that you're holding a meeting, right? And then you have people come, you show them the model, you talk about it, you just get their input, super low pressure. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do want to have something to like present to them and get their feedback, okay? And like I said, there is a cost approximation on there, and you can give them, an idea of that and just get their input. It can also be helpful to compare it to private schools in your area. Private schools might run between, well, $8,000 to $25,000. I mean, the like Christian schools in my area run between like $7,000 and $11,000, and there are a couple of them, 3 I think, within 40 minutes of me, because I am in a more populated area now. But then there's like the more elite private school that's like $25,000 or something, which I don't know anybody who goes there. But if you can compare it to something that's like the comparable other choice, especially with the cost, like it probably runs around a third of the cost, okay? Like $3,000 versus $9,000, because it's a part-time program, right? Also, preschools is a good comparison, because preschools, in my experience, a lot of the families who are most interested in this model have pretty young children, 5, 6, they're just starting the school journey. And sometimes they're coming out of a preschool, or they're in one right now, or maybe they're not, but they're like, well, now they're in school, I got to do something. If you can compare it to a preschool model, which is usually, 6 to 12 hours a week, maybe 9 hours a week, and usually often a comparable tuition, $2,000 to $3,000 or more, right? Depending on if it's, I knew church preschools that were less than $2,000, probably because they were supported by the church. And then other like private preschools that were like $4,000 for, 12 hours a week or whatever. So you can compare that to like preschools. And then you won't get as much of that, like maybe some of that response that we had, where people were either coming from the co-op and they thought this was super expensive because they were coming from a co-op that had a $70 fee, but they had to be there, right? And it was maybe only twice a month or something. Or they were comparing it to like private school, right? And you could just explain, like, it's a part-time private school, essentially. And then I would recommend having another one of those meetings, like have like 3 of them, like a few weeks apart, and keep the conversations going. Like reach out to people, post on social media, reach out to people, have like 3 different interest meetings. That way someone can come and then they can go home and tell their neighbor about it. Like, oh, I met someone who's starting this program you might be interested in. They're having another meeting, right? And this helps spread the word. It helps bring awareness to what the model is, and it helps people get like a little excited about it. And it also helps you get some input as to where your families are coming from and mostly what you're looking for, because you don't want to get too skewed by people's input, because remember, your why and why you're creating this is really going to be your driving thing behind what you create and how you build it. But you do want to make sure that there's enough people interested and that your market can just support it. That's what you're validating. If you have an alternate pedagogy and there's no other hybrid schools in your area, and there's any people at all, there probably is a market, okay? You just want to make sure there's enough people to help inform you as far as like your cost, like how many, I would say cost is probably one of the bigger things that you're looking at if you're in an area that's maybe on one side of the extremes, as far as not all the way to the extreme, but maybe there just aren't a whole ton of people with a lot of money and you're just not getting a ton of interest. Or maybe people show up, but they're like, well, I can't, this sounds great, but I can't pay $3,500. I can maybe pay $2,000. I can't pay $35,000. Well, you may end up with a 1-day program or, or maybe a 24-week program that's 2 days a week, just so you can keep the cost down for those people. Okay. So we talked about that a little, some of the different models in the last episode. So listen to that if you haven't listened to that and you just need to brainstorm a little bit. But you do want to validate your market. And then once you've looked at your competition, you've looked at like the demographics just from like an objective standpoint, like just kind of Google it all. And then you've actually met with real actual people a few times, different people, and you've kind of gotten a response. You're in a lot better shape to then take that input and put it together with the why that you came up with and say, okay, here's what people want. Here's what I want to build. How can I not compromise either of those things, but like help them meet together in a realistic model that's actually going to work? What's that going to look like? Okay. And I can tell you that sometimes you will get people who give a lot of advice, maybe that you don't even really want to hear. Or they just have opinions on things. You can get some naysayers and maybe one here and there who's like, oh, this is never going to work, or that's too expensive, nobody's going to pay for that, or oh no, I don't want that many days, I want to be able to homeschool my kids more, or oh, I can't homeschool. You get both ends of that. Like, I want to be able to homeschool a lot. I don't want that. And then, well, can I do 1 day? Okay, you're going to get that, but don't let that skew you into like, oh no, I have to let people opt into 1 day or 2 days or whatever. Like, don't even consider that. Like, take the input and stick it in your back pocket. And then when you sit down and you come up with your model that you want to build, and you pull those things out and you say, okay, well, I'm going to have to modify this a little to make it a little cheaper, or I'm going to have a more robust home assignments, because there's a lot of people who are really afraid of the home part of it. They're really intimidated by that. So to make sure that's really robust, you're going to bring that in, and then you're going to come back later, assuming that you found there's a pretty good response. Okay. And you have a solid model, and then that's what it's going to be, and you're not going to change it too much, okay? Because it can be easy to get skewed with people's input and feel like you have to keep everyone happy, and you just plug that in as you're planning, and then you have to keep your eyes on what your model is going to be, and just say, this is what I'm building, take it or leave it. It's going to serve you best in the long run, okay? So hopefully that is helpful. And as far as practical numbers, if you get 5 or 6 people to your first meeting and you get 6 or 7 people to the next meeting a couple weeks later, and it's for, maybe a kindergarten through 2nd grade startup program or something, that's probably good. If you're getting 1 person, 0 people, 2 people, and you've had 3 meetings and that's still all you've heard from, it could be that people are just going in a different direction. They're really just not very interested in this. Or it could be that you just need to spend a little more time, like cultivating the interest. And you always want to make sure that you're presenting very confidently. And like I said, you don't have to have all the answers the first meeting, but you do want to have a pretty solid grasp of what it is you're delivering. And that's why I put the why episodes and the like, who are you episodes before this, because you do want to have a degree of confidence that you can build this and that you could do it well and that you're professional about it and that you have a plan, because that's going to really build people's confidence in you as a founder. If they feel like you don't really know what you're doing, or you've kind of just like come up with this idea, but you didn't really research it and you've never done any of this before and you don't really know how you're going to do it, then they can kind of be like, I'm not so sure if I trust this, this plan. But if you're like, well, I have a plan. I know how I'm going to fill my gaps. I'm going to have to hire someone to do this. And you just seem very professional and businesslike about it. Even if you don't have all the answers, that's going to build people's confidence and make them feel like you know what you're doing and you're going to build something that they trust. Okay. So you're building trust, you're getting input, but you're not putting too much into the people's input. You're just keeping it for your planning. And this is going to help you validate your market. So next time we're going to get more into actual implementation logistics, such as business setup and all of that. But make sure that you have done all of this preparation work of validating the market, understanding your own why, brainstorming your model, and knowing like what your strengths and weaknesses are, so that you don't get burnt out, you don't get too discouraged, or you don't let discouragement get you down and make you quit. And you can build something with confidence. All right. Thanks so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you check out the resources I am developing at startahybridSchool.com. Send me an email anytime. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.